Life with Lucas was everything I ever dreamed of. Lucas was my husband. We were married for 6 years. He was my heart. I thought I was happy before I met him. I was really happy. I had just graduated from college, was healthy, had a good job, and had just moved into the apartment I'd wanted to live in since moving to Santa Barbara. I was working on a new microchip for Consolidated Silicon Systems. Chips are getting smaller and faster every day, and this one was going to be epic. Lucas was part of the software development team we worked with. I thought he was handsome when I first saw him. He had this curly head of dark brown hair, olive skin, and the most amazing hazel eyes I had ever seen. He was huge, probably 6 foot 4 inches tall, and very muscular. His arms were massive, and he turned me on just by his appearance. I hoped he would notice me. I'm a little noticeable. People usually notice my hair first. They are very long, reaching to the middle of the thighs. They are very light, almost white, and people tend to stop and stare. The rest is good for me too. I have nice breasts, not huge, but not small, and they stand up quite well. I train a lot. I'm 5'10" and I weigh 130 pounds, so I'm not a small girl. I have blue eyes and light eyebrows and eyelashes. I hate them, so I put mascara on my eyelashes and dye my eyebrows. He noticed me, apparently, because after 3 weeks of working together, he invited me to lunch. I cursed internally because this was the one day I couldn't go. I had an appointment with government contractors for lunch. I asked him if he could give me another chance the next day, and he smiled the most beautiful smile I've ever seen. "Sin," he said, "and it's me, Sinclair Buckley. I'm willing to wait 1,000 years to invite you to dinner." I know I blushed. "Thanks, Lucas, but I'll probably get hungry sooner," I said. He laughed. "Yes, me too," he said. "Lunch tomorrow," agreed. He talked to me quite a bit for the rest of the day. Not only did he look good, but he was a funny guy. He was witty and charming, and with every minute I spent with him, I wanted to get to know him more. He took me to Panera Bread Company, and we talked so much that we almost forgot to eat. When we returned, it was already 5 minutes late, but no one noticed. We went to lunch 3 times, and he invited me to dinner. It was Friday night, and he took me to a club. It was not a fancy club, but a cool one, the kind that you can only get into by membership. There was a band and a small dance floor, and we danced about 6 times. We sat in comfortable chairs and talked with his friends. He introduced me, and we had a great time. This was our first date. He drove me home after that and kissed me goodbye. He was a true gentleman, and I was looking forward to our next date. 3 months later, we were an exclusive couple, and after another month, we were in bed. I admit, I didn't have much experience. Up to this point, I had only had 2 men. I was not promiscuous, and I had to be very serious about a man in order to go to bed with him. My first time was at my high school graduation with a guy I'd been dating for 2 years. That night, I realized that this relationship had no future. It was painful, brief, and he didn't care about making me feel good. It was quick and indifferent, and he fell asleep immediately. I never went out with him again. The second time was in my 3rd year of college, and it went on for a while until he offered to share me with his roommate. He left too. Lucas was a different breed. This was my dream man. He sent flowers the evening we finally made love. He took me away, gave me wine, dinner, dancing, music, and more romance. By the time we got back to my apartment, I was like a cat in heat. I pulled him inside at the door and tried to melt him with kisses. "Lucas, I think I'm in love with you," I told him. "Take me to bed and make love to me." "Are you sure, Sin?" he asked me. "I don't want to ruin everything. It also seems to me that I am in love with you, and I am not pushing you into anything." I led him to my bed. We made love at least once a week, and on weekends we hardly left our apartments. He had a nice apartment above an art store, and we spent a lot of time there too. We had been making love for 9 months when he said we would go out on Friday. He said it would be a special occasion, and I should dress for a formal occasion. He rang the doorbell, and I answered. This was unusual because he usually just used his key and came in. His jaw dropped when he saw me. I was wearing a dark blue dress that he had never seen before. It was one shoulder, open-backed, and had a side slit that went up very high. I was wearing stockings, and when I moved in a certain way, you could see the lace at the top. "Oh my God, Sin," he gasped. "You look absolutely amazing." "Thank you, sir," I said. "You look very good, too." He was wearing a black tuxedo with a purple shirt and a matching bow tie. He offered me his hand, and we left. The limousine was parked at the curb and took us to dinner. Dinner was delicious, but I felt like everyone was looking at me. The limousine was still waiting when we finished dinner, and we went to the show. It was a farce, and we had a great time. We were among the last to leave, and we stood in the foyer for a minute. He finally turned to face me, and I noticed that he was wearing white gloves. He knelt on the floor of the theater foyer and opened the velvet box. Inside was a ring with a huge sapphire surrounded by 4 small diamonds. "Sinclair, will you marry me?" he asked. It was the happiest moment of my life. We got married on April 20th. We had a big wedding. My father walked me down the aisle while his mother sat crying with happiness throughout the ceremony. We started our married life with a trip to Mexico. It was wonderful. My father lived there for many years and stayed in my apartment while we were at his villa in Monterrey. We stayed there for 2 weeks and returned home. After a year, we felt financially secure and emotionally stable. I wanted 2 children, and he wanted 3. I wanted to have them early so we could enjoy them for as long as possible. My parents were of age when they gave birth to me, and my mother died when I was 19. Dad was still in good shape, but I wanted our children to have parents for as long as possible. Life has been strange for me. I heard my friends at work talking about their lives, and it was nothing like mine. They talked about how they cheated on their husbands, went out to have fun and used substances, picked up random men in bars, and how interesting their lives were. I just stopped communicating with them. They invited me to bachelorette parties and for drinks after work. I had one thought: to go home. If I wanted to spend an evening out, Lucas was happy to organize it for me. If I wanted a drink, he was happy to go with me. These women were either married to assholes or were one themselves. My sex life was amazing. Lucas was an incredibly creative lover. He was always horny and would take me wherever he found me when the desire hit him. I had a hard time keeping my clothes on at home because he kept taking them off of me. I had to constantly pick up my clothes in random places. It seemed to me that this man worshipped me. As soon as I mentioned something that I liked, he tried to make it happen. One day, when some guy at the gym kept pestering me, I mentioned it to Lucas. He came with me next time. That idiot was there, practicing on the bench. Lucas walked over and stood next to him until he finished his approach. "Hey, dude, do you mind if I squeeze in on the approach?" he asked. The guy clearly did not want to get up. This was evident from the expression on his face. He did sets of 3 by 5 at 185 pounds. Lucas loaded 4 plates and pressed 5 times with 405. He sat down and caught his breath for a minute. "Hey, baby," he called me to where they were training. He introduced me as his wife, and I saw that the guy began to get nervous. "Sin practices here all the time," Lucas told him. "If you ever see anyone bothering her, let me know, okay?" That guy never came near me again. It seems he didn't even look in my direction. Lucas and I started working out a lot together after that. He had always been at a different gym, but now he joined mine, and we ran on the treadmill side by side. He was my best friend, and I was his. We argued and fought like other people, but we promised each other in the first week of our marriage that we would never go to bed angry at each other. We've never done this. We made love 2 to 3 times a day when we decided to have a baby. 11 months later, Jonathan was born. This was the perfect baby. He had Lucas' skin and my hair. The joy we felt holding this little bundle of perfection was like nothing else I have ever experienced in my life. I almost never left him. My job was in such a state that I could work mostly from home. If I needed to go to the office for any reason, Lucas could stay home that day. His mother would come and pick Jonathan up every Friday night and leave him overnight so we could spend the evening together. He went through all the normal stages of childhood until he was 3.5 years old. I took on more of the workload, and we started discussing having a second child. I had a meeting to attend in Austin, Texas, and Lucas and Jonathan drove me to the airport. I was gone for 4 days, and they called me every evening and talked to me. "Mommy, I think my head is broken," Jonathan told me on the phone. I was due back the next evening, and I couldn't wait to see him. "It's probably Dad," I told him. "Why do you think your head is broken, baby?" "It hurts," he said. "Thomas had a broken leg, and he said it hurt. That's why I think my head is broken." "Well, tell Dad," I told him. "He'll give you Tylenol and you'll feel better." We continued talking about other things, and by the time I landed at the airport, I had already forgotten about it. He ran up and threw himself into my arms as soon as I left the gate. I held him and Lucas came over to kiss me. I set him down and we went to get my luggage. I noticed that he walked strangely. "Why are you walking like that, dear?" I asked him. He turned his head slightly to the side. "To see clearly," he said. I knelt down in front of him. I looked into his eyes and noticed that one of his pupils was huge, dilated much more than the other. "Lucas, did Jonathan hit his head?" I asked. "I do not know why," he asked. "Look at his eyes," I said. I covered my normal eye with my hand. "Do you see anything, baby?" "No, only gray," he said. I closed my other eye. "And now?" I asked. "Yes, I see Mom." He hugged me. "Lucas, we need to take him to the emergency room," I said. We took my bags and went straight to the hospital. They ran a lot of tests and scans and sent us home. In the middle of the night, the hospital called and asked who his pediatrician was. I gave them a name and number, and 20 minutes later, Chris's office called and told us to come over immediately. She came immediately when we arrived and took us to the meeting room. I've known Chris and Ricky since 5th grade. Her husband, Ricky, was a surgeon. She sat us down and showed us many test results and pictures. "Sinclair, I'm sorry to tell you this, but Jonathan has a brain tumor," she said. My world collapsed. "I'm afraid it's glioblastoma. This is the worst type of brain cancer he could have had. I'm not an oncologist, Sin, but I will refer you to a pediatric oncologist. He will be able to discuss treatment options and prognosis with you. I want you to go to him right now. He will be waiting for you. He will probably want to hospitalize Jonathan and begin treatment immediately." My mind was numb. It was as if a mental haze had enveloped me, and I could hear Chris speak, but I could not process what she was saying. My conscious mind rejected it, and the information only registered subconsciously, casting a shadow over everything good in my life. I looked at Lucas. He was leaning on the wall, and I saw this powerful, gigantic man sitting on the floor, with his face buried in his hands, crying uncontrollably. It shocked me. I couldn't imagine Lucas like that, but he was there. I ran towards him and took his hands away, kneeling in front of him. I pressed his head to my chest and held him. "Lucas, everything will be fine," I told him. "We'll take care of him. We just need to believe. We don't know enough yet to draw conclusions." He looked at me, and the pain in his eyes tore my heart. "He has brain cancer, Sin. Our baby has brain cancer. What should we do?" "We will do whatever we need to do," I said. "We will fight to the last. If the worst happens, we will be grateful to God for every day we spent with him. Lucas, get up and take care of your son and wife. You can't break like that. I need your core. Jonathan needs you. I don't want to have this conversation with you anymore. I love you and I know you're hurting, but we depend on you. Fix it, Lucas." I saw determination forming in his eyes. Slowly, his demeanor changed and he pulled himself together. "Sorry, Sin," he told me. "Let's get information and start planning. I'm fine. God, you are strong. I love you so much, honey. You can count on me from now on." I kissed his forehead and we stood up. Chris hugged us and gave us the doctor's name and contact information. We picked up Jonathan from Lucas' mom's house and went to the oncologist's office. His name was Blanco, and his office was across the street from the hospital. I didn't like this man right away. He was small, dark, smug, and spoke with a French accent. He studied for the tests and broke our hearts. Mr. and Mrs. Davis, I'm afraid we have very few treatment options at this time, he said. We will hospitalize him immediately. I'll schedule surgery for the morning. We will remove most of the tumor, but we will not be able to remove all of it. We will carry out a course of radiotherapy and chemotherapy, but we can only slow down the growth of the tumor. How much can you slow it down? Lucas asked. I think we can buy him in 6 months, Blanco said. I couldn't believe my ears. How long if we do nothing? I asked. Maybe 3 months, he said. This is a very fast-growing tumor. So you're saying you'll cut my son's head open, mutilate him, burn his brain with radiation, poison him with chemicals so he can live a miserable life for another 3 months, I asked. You are not being reasonable, he said. This is a standard treatment protocol. What is the non-standard protocol? Lucas asked. I'm afraid that's the only option I can offer, Blanco said. I will begin processing the paperwork for his hospitalization immediately. Can you leave us alone with Jonathan for a minute? I asked. We need to talk privately. Of course, he said. He showed us the conference room and left, closing the door. Lucas, I won't let this man do things like that to Jonathan, I said. If he had said we had a 50-50 chance or something, I would have agreed. He is going to make the last months of our child's life hell. Let's take it home, sit on our computers, and find something that will give us hope. I don't care if it's juice from a bug's ass, water from a spring, or faith healers. This guy has nothing for us but to torment our baby. I'm with you, he said. I have heard about treatments in other countries that are not approved here. Anything will be better than this. Let's get out of here. I took Jonathan in my arms and we left. I don't know how long it took them to realize we were gone, but Chris called me an hour later. Sin, what are you doing? She asked. They told us Jonathan had 6 months to live if we let them mutilate him, burn his brain, and poison him, I told her. Then, after all this torment, he will die anyway. We won't put him through this, Chris. We'd rather he just leave quietly. I understand, Chris said. I don't think Blanco will understand. He will probably call the guardianship authorities. Sinclair, you didn't hear that from me. If you say I mentioned it, I will deny it. I have heard of a clinic in Mexico that is using a new therapy that is reporting great success in such cases. It is not approved here and probably never will be. I don't know the name, but you can find it on the internet. Check it out and call me. I wouldn't stay at home. The guardianship authorities will try to either force you to take Jonathan to the hospital or take him away from you. You should go home, pack your things and leave. Go somewhere where you won't be found and call me. We did just that. My father, Brock, owned a place south of Columbus, New Mexico. It was several thousand acres, there was a house there, and no one knew us there. We packed up Lucas' truck, and we were on the road 2 hours later. We stopped in Deeming and checked into a motel. We had a lot to do. We settled in, bought food, and sat down at the computers. It took some time, but we found this place. A German doctor named Zarigsky was conducting cancer research in Texas. He isolated some compounds and conducted many clinical trials. About 2 years after the trial began, the FDA shut it down. According to his data, he treated people, especially children, with brain tumors that doctors had already given up on. I was skeptical of snake oil salesmen, but we had to try something. I wasn't going to let my child die without a fight. There were 2 other places that seemed promising. All 3 were in Mexico, and I knew we had to check them out. Jonathan didn't seem any worse, so the next day we went to the ranch. Lucas called my dad, and he got on a plane to El Paso that night. I called Lily and told her what was going on. She was almost hysterical and insisted on coming to us. That night in bed, Lucas and I had a long conversation. Lucas, I'm so scared, I told him. Please, no matter what happens, don't stop loving me. I will always love you. Help me fight for our baby. I will love you until I die, he promised. We can handle it, Sin. Just hold on. We are in this together, and we will get through this. Brock will be here tomorrow. So does Mom. We'll call the clinics, set up appointments, and start fighting this thing. We made love, and it was sweet and sad and affirming of life. The hugs of my man and the feeling of his strength and love simply drove me crazy, and I forgot about everything except his love, which covered me and entered me. We fell asleep, physically and emotionally exhausted. We spent the next morning on the phone organizing things, closing accounts, moving money, and making appointments. We both received a call from Blanco's office, and later in the day, we received a call from Family and Child Services. We didn't answer, but they said that we needed to call them back urgently. We met Dad at the airport, and by the time we got home, Lily was already there. I always called her Mom, and that hasn't changed now. They ran around Jonathan and walked in circles around each other like strange cats. They never really got along. I never understood why. Both of them were wonderful people. After a couple of hours, I couldn't stand it anymore. Mom, Dad, can I see you for a minute? I asked them. I took them to the kitchen and made us all coffee. We sat down at the kitchen table and I told them everything I thought. I don't know what's going on between you two, I said, but this must stop now. There's a little boy over there who's going to die unless the people who love him do something. Do you love your grandson or not? Do you love Lucas and me? If you act like a couple of high school kids, it will break my heart. Stop this and let's get to work. I couldn't help myself and burst into tears. They were both terribly upset and jumped up to console me. They couldn't stop apologizing to me and each other. They promised that they would be absolute rocks for me to lean on, and that they would do whatever it took for us. They hugged each other and me and apologized again. For the next 3 days, they were the perfect grandparents and parents. They worked just as hard as Lucas and I did preparing for our trip to Mexico. Children and family services kept calling, and we kept not answering. By Saturday evening, we were ready to leave. We planned to leave on Sunday morning and arrive at Zurigsky's clinic on Monday morning. On Saturday evening, the home phone rang and Dad answered. He spoke for a while and his face turned pale. After he hung up, he sat down next to me. Lucas, it was the sheriff, he said. They know you're here. He just warned me. Said they tracked you on your cell phones and would come pick Jonathan up tomorrow morning. What do we do? We'll leave now, Lucas said. How long will it take to cross the border? 2 hours to Antelope Wells, Dad said. I would send you there if time didn't matter. You would stay in the US longer. This would give them more time to report you. The road is better, but I will say Puerto Palomas. It's 20 minutes. The road will be held to Los Trios, but it will get you out of danger faster. I think you need to leave now. Get to a few miles from the border and wait until dawn. You'll be suspicious if you try to cross now. Are you not going? Lucas asked. Looks like you're not going. I think I'll stay, said Dad. I'll hide, pretend we're still here. Call me when you cross the border, and I'll let them in. This way they won't inform the border guards until you are safe. Lily looked at her dad with tears in her eyes. Brock, I was wrong about you, she said. You are a great person, a great father, and a great grandfather. I'm staying with you. We all tried to talk her out of it, but she was adamant. She said that we were just wasting time and we needed to leave. I knew that once Lily decided to do something, she couldn't change it, so I just started getting ready. We left by 3 a.m. and found a small dirt road a few miles north of the border, hidden from view of the checkpoint. We drove along it until we were out of sight of the highway and parked. Jonathan never woke up, and Lucas and I tried to sleep. I know I dozed off from time to time and hoped he did too. I set the alarm on my mobile and it rang at 7. We tried to wake up. We got out of the car and stretched, walked around a bit, and I told Lucas I needed to go to the bathroom. Him too, and he stayed by the car while I moved a little to the side. I returned, and he also took advantage of the conveniences, as he called them. We got back in the car and drove south. All our passports were in order, and we crossed the border after a quick inspection by the guards. The guards on the Mexican side asked us several questions, but did not detain us when we said that we were going to a clinic for cancer treatment. I spoke Spanish fluently, and Lucas could make some sense of himself. I lied and said the treatment was for me, but they didn't ask questions. When we were far enough south to get on Highway 2, I got a signal and texted Lily that we were safe. She answered and said they were surrounded by sheriffs and family services, but were going to let them in. We didn't hear from them for 2 days. When they heard, they said that they were arrested and interrogated. They were charged with obstructing police, but Dad thought the charges would be dropped. Once they get back to the ranch and pack up, they'll join us. Their passports were not taken away, so they were free to travel. We began Jonathan's treatment on the second day after arriving at the clinic. It was a beautiful desert area, and I thought that if nothing else, this whole idyllic setting would be good for us all. It was difficult for Jonathan. He couldn't understand why he was being stabbed with needles. It was difficult for Lucas and me too. If you've never been in this situation, it's almost impossible to describe. There lay the dearest treasure of my heart, tiny in her hospital bed, surrounded by nurses, crying in pain, and there was nothing I could do. "Mommy, they hurt me. Make them stop." That scream tore my heart apart, leaving it bleeding and broken on the floor of this clinic. There was no respite, no relief from anxiety. I knelt by his bed, and the only thing that kept me from completely collapsing was that I had to be strong for my baby. "I know, Jonathan," I tried to reassure him. "You are very sick, and the doctors need to give you this medicine so that you get better. I have to let them give these injections to get you better. It will all be over in a minute." The words tore my throat, and I felt that I'm about to collapse. 4-year-old boys do not understand pain now, so that there will be life later. It is impossible to make them understand. All we could do was show our love and care while comforting ourselves with thoughts of an alternative. Lily and Dad arrived the day after his treatment began and stayed the entire time. I don't think we could have done it without their support. It may be hard to imagine, but the first month changed us in ways that were previously unimaginable to us. This damaged my relationship with Lucas. We both became irritable and tense. The slightest thing would make us angry, and we would start quarreling. Lily and Dad played referee until we were both outraged. They beat us several times. "You both need to get your heads out of your asses and act like normal people," Lily told us. "There's a little boy out there who needs his parents to act like people and not like Dobermans." We both promised to do better, apologized, and it went on for about 2 days. I felt exhausted all the time, and I'm sure Lucas felt the same way. This made us extremely irritable, and we got on each other's nerves in ways that are hard to imagine. We walked like stray dogs with disheveled hair. We never made love. One of us was always too annoyed with the other to be intimate, or we were exhausted and just wanted to sleep. After 3 months, we were barely polite to each other. Jonathan's prognosis was improving day by day, while Lucas's and mine were getting worse. I seriously believe that if it weren't for Jonathan, one of us would have left. I think in some twisted sense, each of us blamed the other for our situation. It was unfair and it was wrong, but we were hardly rational beings. I thought Lucas should spend more time with Jonathan. Lucas thought I should spend more time with him. It didn't mean he was dismissive, but it seemed like every time there was a crisis, I was there and he wasn't. As for the time spent with him, I became increasingly angry at the sight of him. I have come to the conclusion that illness or death has 2 effects. Either you get closer, stand together, and come out of this stronger than ever, or you fall apart under the stress. I never believed that we would be people who would fall apart. I tried, believe me, I tried, and I believe Lucas tried too. We seemed to be working well together, and suddenly one of us would do something that annoyed the other, and we would fight again. That's when Dr. Melissa Hardy came into the picture. She was not Jonathan's doctor. She specialized in breast cancer, but she often came to see him. She was a very kind woman, and Jonathan adored her. I think it was partly because she never stuck him with needles, but every now and then I would come back to his room and find her reading to him or doing a puzzle or something. I must admit that I myself really fell in love with her. I knew Lucas trusted her, and they became close. It was a shock to me when she showed up at the cottage on the property where we lived and detonated a bomb in my face. I offered her a cup of coffee, and we sat on the terrace in the morning sun. I felt that she wanted to tell me something, but it was difficult for her to begin. Finally, I couldn't stand it anymore. Melissa, I told her, I know you want to tell me something. Why don't you say it straight? She laughed. I'm so obvious, right? She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, which I recognized as a nervous gesture. I recognized you a little, I said. Okay, I'll just say it, she said. Sinclair, what are you planning to do about you and Lucas? I don't think I quite understand what you're talking about, I said. Are you going to divorce him? She asked. This pissed me off. My first reaction is to tell you it's none of your business, I said. You're minding your own business, and it's very unpleasant. I would ask you to go away and never talk about this again, but something tells me that this is not just idle curiosity, right? No, you're right, she said. It's none of my business, and I would never ask such a question, but I feel like I have to ask. The reason is that I seem to be falling in love with your husband. God, I feel like such a miserable bitch. Here you are in such grief and stress, and I know that it is incredibly difficult for you. Let me explain. Will you let me do this, Sinclair? I wanted to claw her eyes out, but I pulled myself together. I don't think I'll like it, but go ahead. I think I need to hear this. Okay, she said. I never wanted all this to happen. You know I love your son. That's how it all started. I went to his place and Lucas was there alone while you were resting or eating or whatever. It was clear that he was in pain. Apparently you do too. At first I just told him that if he needed to talk, I was ready to listen. You know, I made you the same offer. I nodded. She told me several times that she would give me a shoulder to cry on. Go on, I said. Well, you're stronger than Lucas, she said. You never accepted my offer. He accepted. At first it was all about Jonathan. He told me how worried he is, how you both are worried. How did you come here? How afraid he is. Then he started opening up about you. He talked about how much stress this puts on both of you. He said that you hardly talk, and when you do, you usually lose your temper. From there it escalated into revelations of intimate details. You don't need me to go into detail. You know, one day we were in the chapel and he broke down. He was afraid that he was losing you, that you no longer loved him. He was crying and I just thought I would hug him and give him comfort. She took a deep breath and I could see that she was struggling for words. So, you hugged him and, well, it was more than a hug, she said. Before I realized what was happening, we were kissing. I was all on fire, and his hand was in my blouse, and I was tearing off his shirt. It was difficult for me to contain my emotions. She also clearly held back hers. Tears were streaming down my cheeks. Why are you telling me this? I managed to squeeze out. Because I have to, she said. I heard the trembling in her voice and saw that she was being torn apart from the inside. Sin, I can't tell you how much I despise myself right now, she sobbed. I am everything I hate about other people. Here you are, fighting for your son's life. You are in such pain and anguish of soul, and I am like a vulture swooping down to feed on a corpse. You have to believe me. I never, ever wanted any of this to happen. I didn't mean to seduce your husband. Never in my wildest fantasies did I think that this could happen. I had heard thousands of lectures on how to avoid getting involved with patients, and I thought I was invulnerable. Well, guess what? I'm not like that. I also have human emotions. I got involved, and I'm very, very sorry. Will you ever be able to forgive me, Sinclair? I sat for a minute, lost in thought. Do you love him? He loves you? Demandilla I have no idea, she said. I can't love him in this situation. It would be inhumane. I can't imagine anything more cruel for the three of you. I think in another life, or if you are going to divorce him, yes, I would love him. That's why I asked you this question. That's why I came to you. I couldn't live with myself a minute longer if I didn't do this. What are you going to do? I have no idea, I said. Lucas knows you were going to talk to me. No, she shook her head. I didn't tell him. This is between you and me. I nodded. Well, I think the first thing I need to do is talk to Lucas, I told her. Then I'll tell you. She nodded and stood up. I stood up to see her out, and she stopped, looking back at me. Suddenly, she burst into tears. She let out a low groan and began to sob hysterically, wringing her hands, her beautiful features distorted with pain and shame. Sin, she sobbed. I'm so sorry. Please, I will never. Never. I'm such a miserable bitch. Please, Sin. My heart broke for her. I walked over and hugged her. It's okay, I told her. I believe you, Melissa. I believe you. Everything will be okay. I know you didn't want this to happen. I won't say I'm not mad at you. You should never have let yourself this close for this to happen, but it did. You came to me, and that means a lot. You are a good person who made a terrible mistake. I forgive you. Everything will be okay. I held her, and she sobbed on my chest for a long time. Gradually, she calmed down, and her sobs subsided. She looked at me, those beautiful brown eyes filled with tears. Thank you, Sin, she said. You are a very impressive person. You have more heart than I could ever have. I would claw your eyes out. I laughed. That's exactly what I was thinking when you started this conversation, I said. Is it too late to do this? She sobbed again and laughed. I can always come back later, she said. Thank you, Sinclair. I am so sorry. I know. I hugged her again, and she ran her left hand through my hair, pulling me down to kiss my lips. It was a long kiss, and I started to feel uncomfortable. She pulled away, and there was a familiar sparkle in her eyes that hadn't been there for the last couple of weeks. Just teasing, she laughed again. No matter how things turn out, can we have lunch together? I smiled. Maybe I'll let you know. After she left, I sat alone in a chair and sipped a cup of coffee. What should I do? I've always been good at introspection. I knew myself well. Was I angry? Yes, I was angry as never before in my life. I realized that part of the blame lies with me. I've been a bit of an ice queen while we've been here. I knew it. I could make excuses by saying it was because of the stress I was under, and Lucas was no better. If the situation were reversed, what would I do? I asked myself this question. Would I get too close to a handsome doctor? I decided that I would never know. It's impossible to tell until you're in that situation, but I think not. I am not a person who needs to share with others. I have a mom and dad if I need a confidant. Lucas also had this choice and showed a weakness of character by choosing Melissa. Is this forgivable? Perhaps if he can explain it to me satisfactorily and show why it was an aberration and not something that will ever happen again. We were under a lot of stress, but it's in moments like these that your character keeps you going. When you're alone in your darkest hour, character is all you can count on. His character couldn't stand it. We'll see where we go next. I went and called Dad. He immediately realized that something was wrong. Did something happen to Jonathan? He asked. No, he's fine, I said. It's about Lucas and me, Dad. I need you or Lily to stay with Jonathan for a few hours until Lucas, and I can sort this out. I'll tell you about it, but not until we've decided everything. Can you deal with this? Of course, he said. I love you, Sinclair. You are my daughter, and I will always do whatever you need. You are the strongest, smartest, and most loving person I know. I think you've lost your way a little. I understand why. I don't know how you stayed sane. I admire you and will always love you. Do what you need to do and don't worry about that old fool. I hugged him and we went to Jonathan's room. Lucas was there and Jonathan was sleeping. He looked like a little angel laying there in his Batman pajamas. His tumor shrank to the point where it was no longer visible on scans, and his vision and eyes returned to normal. Lucas looked at us, and I saw the weariness on his face. He looked beaten and depressed. Lucas, you should go with Sin, Dad told him. Have a rest. Lily will come later, and we will take care of Jonathan. Lucas nodded, kissed Jonathan's forehead, and we walked back to our cottage. On a whim, I took his hand and we walked together. When we walked in, I led him to the couch and sat him down. I knelt between his legs and took both his hands in mine. He looked into my eyes wearily. Lucas, do you still love me? I asked him. He looked into my eyes for a long time, then something inside him broke, and he began to tremble. Tears streamed down his cheeks, and he squeezed my hands so tightly that I almost couldn't feel them. God, Sin, I love you so much that I could never tell you this, he said. You know, right? I nodded. Yes, I know. How? He asked. No, it doesn't matter. Sinclair, I'm afraid you don't love me anymore. You push me away. Damn, I'm pushing you away too. I know why, and I don't blame you. I'm doing the same thing. Jonathan is just so sick. Every day we walk into his room and wonder if today they will tell us that he has gotten worse or that the treatment is not working. I know I promised to be strong and be there for you, but I'm not like you. You are only getting stronger. The harder it is, the stronger you become. I'm only getting weaker. I'm so ashamed of myself. It makes me feel insufficient, like I'm not coping, and I know how stupid it is, but I started to get angry at you. You're wrong about me, I told him. I may seem like this on the outside, but on the inside, I'm scared, afraid, and lately I've been feeling completely alone. I felt that you didn't love me anymore. It just makes me feel more ashamed, he said. I am your husband, and I should be someone you can count on. It makes me feel weak and like I'm failing. I'm so sorry, Sin. I allowed something to start that shouldn't have started. I felt like a failure, and I still feel like that, even more so, and I was looking for something that, one, to feel better. I don't know how you can forgive me. I'm so sorry, and I feel so mean. I love you more than ever, but I'm lost and don't know how to find my way back. He couldn't continue. I picked him up from the sofa and took him to the bedroom. We fell together on the bed and hugged each other, crying for our son, for ourselves, for all the pain of our lives. I cried myself to sleep, and I think he did too. When I woke up, I was lying half on top of him, my cheek resting on his chest, and he was sleeping. I looked at him while he was sleeping. I didn't know what we would do, how we would move forward, but I had hope. This was the man I loved. We might have been lost for a while, but I was determined. For him, for Jonathan, for myself, and the other children I hoped to have, this was my life, and I was going to take it back. I got up and went to the clinic. Mom was there, and I told her I needed a few more hours. She nodded. You look rested, she said. Go do what you need to do, Brock told me. I walked back to the cottage and Lucas was still sleeping. I took a shower and walked naked to the bed. He snored lightly. I carefully unbuttoned his shirt and exposed his chest. The pants were a little more difficult, and he stirred in his sleep. I was able to pull them down to one side and gently pushed him until he rolled over. I took them off his thighs and feet. At some point he woke up. We made love slowly and sweetly twice, and he fucked me like a man possessed for the third time. We slept for half an hour and took a shower together. We still had problems and a long way to go, but we were on the right track. We talked and tried to improve our communication. He explained his feelings clearly enough for me to understand. I wasn't happy about it. In fact, every time I thought about it, my heart broke. But I had to find the strength to fight it. I believed it was a result of the extreme stress we were both under, a kind and compassionate person, and circumstances that were out of control. I never asked Lucas for details, and I didn't want to know. In the end, it didn't matter. His character had cracked, and I believed that this would never happen again. I had this conversation with Melissa, and she was as supportive as I could have imagined. She told me how it all happened. She was a doctor. Doctors treat people. She felt called to do this even before she started medical school. Seeing Lucas fall apart made her feel like she could fix it. She could just give him an outlet, someone to talk to, and that would help. As they grew closer, she didn't even realize that their relationship was changing. It was a shock to her in the chapel, but she realized that she had feelings for Lucas that were completely different than she had ever imagined. She blamed herself and never stopped apologizing to me. I decided to forgive her, and we became very close friends indeed. She stayed away from Lucas, even when he was with me, although Lily and Dad said she visited Jonathan when Lucas wasn't around. Jonathan continued to improve, and Dr. Zarigski finally discharged him. He assured us that it was unlikely that the tumor would return. In fact, he believed that Jonathan was no more likely to get a brain tumor again than Lucas or I was. We left the clinic 6 months after arriving with a healthy little boy, a slightly damaged mother and father, and two parents who had fallen in love. Yes, Lily and Dad were a couple. The most incredible couple you could imagine, but here they were. They seemed very much in love and as comfortable with each other and us as I would have imagined. Jonathan returned to the clinic every 3 months for checkups in the first year, then every 6 months, and finally only occasionally to monitor his progress. We returned to Dad's ranch and began to arrange our lives as before. The worry about our son was always there, but over time, and without relapse, it became just a faint echo. Lucas and I came back. It seemed like we were stronger than ever. But there was one thing that we did not take into account: family and childhood services. They had a long and vengeful memory. Lucas and I managed. We still had moments of doubt, and I still had moments of anger. It felt like something was missing, but we were progressing, and I felt like we were on the cusp of getting back to where we were. We just needed some little spark to bridge the gap. Jonathan's recovery relieved the stress, and we felt such relief that everything else seemed insignificant. We took Jonathan to the local pediatrician. Absolutely no problems and no signs of tumor. At Jonathan's 18-month checkup, I had a project at a new consulting job that I couldn't leave, and Lucas took him back to Dr. Zarigski with Dad. Mom and I stayed home, and I completed my project. I hadn't heard from Lucas for 2 days, but I expected them to return that afternoon. Something was bothering me, but I couldn't figure out what it was. It seemed that I had forgotten something important, but what exactly eluded me? I felt like I was being watched, but it was stupid because my mom was the only other person there. Late in the afternoon, I saw a plume of dust approaching the road towards the house. I shouted to Lily, and she came out into the yard to meet them with me. Jonathan jumped out of the Jeep before the dust settled and ran into my arms. Lucas and Dad were getting their luggage out of the Jeep when 4 other plumes of dust began to sweep down the road toward the house. As they approached, I heard sirens. 3 state patrol cars stopped in the yard and officers rushed out, guns drawn and taking cover behind their vehicles. I saw the county sheriff's car parked in the distance on the road. Lucas ran towards me and Jonathan. I saw one of the officers watching Lucas with a weapon. He was going to shoot my husband. No doubt some newbie who was itching for a notch on his belt. I pushed Jonathan towards Lily and lunged at Lucas. Something hit me in the back as I fell onto Lucas. He fell and I ended up on top of him. I couldn't move. I felt a burning pain in my chest, just above my right breast. I heard Lily scream and don't remember anything else. It was dark, cold, and painful. I saw flashes, people in strange clothes with masks on their faces, bright lights, and loud noises. One day, I saw my dad sitting on a chair against the wall with a bad painting. Jonathan sat on his lap. I tried to reach out to them, but the effort was too great, and the darkness swallowed me. Gradually, I realized that I could hear. I heard voices talking. I didn't recognize one of them, but another was Dad's, and another one belonged to Lily. "Please, Brock, put yourself in my position," said a voice I didn't recognize. "You've known me for 60 years. I called you and warned you that these bastards from the family service are coming, for Christ's sake. I held them off until the kids crossed the border and stopped the DA from bringing charges against you. You'll ruin the department, and we won't be able to do anything. The next time Widow Banks in Flat Top calls that illegals are cutting up her fences and stealing from her, we won't be able to help. You know I'm not a villain. I don't touch smokers, easy girls, or tribes. You know I'm not a bad guy." I heard my mother's voice. "That may be true, Gerald, but you brought with you the bastard who shot my daughter. He would have shot my brother-in-law and probably killed him. Why? For saving their son's life. Have you seen the medical reports? If they had listened to that bastard Blanco, my grandson would have suffered terribly and would already be dead. You know we made him testify at the hearing. That judge ridiculed him and threw him out of court. Your deputy shot my daughter because she loved her son and tried to protect her husband." Her voice became louder and louder. "Lily, I can't tell you how sorry I am about this," said a voice I didn't recognize. "I didn't want Bayer to be there. I told you this. The only reason he was there was because his father insisted. He's got enough connections with the state patrol guys that they took him along. He should have just watched. He was just a rookie who thought he was some kind of special forces hero. I fired him, blacklisted him, and he will never work in law enforcement again. Well, if this girl doesn't recover there, if she doesn't recover completely, I'll bury you all. Dad's voice was full of poison. Trust me, Brock, no one feels worse about her than I do, said an unfamiliar voice. This is one amazing woman. I wish my girls were half like her. I tried to open my eyes, and they opened. I saw Lily, Dad, and a man in uniform standing at the door. My hands wouldn't obey me, so I tried to call them. I managed to let out a wheeze, and their heads turned towards me. Gerald, call Lucas. Tell him to bring Jonathan. Dad barked at the man in uniform. I saw him take out his phone as Lily and Dad quickly walked towards me. Mom stroked my head and cried, and Dad fussed around. Can I get you something, Sinclair? Do you know who we are? Do you need anything, honey? I tried to say something, but my mouth was as dry as the Mojave Desert. I wheezed a little, and my mother realized what was happening. Bring her some ice, she ordered. Dad hurried over and returned with a styrofoam cup full of crushed ice and a plastic spoon. He scooped up a spoonful of ice and brought it to my dry lips. The blessed coolness moistened my mouth and flowed down my parched throat. This caused me to cough, and a sharp pain shot through my chest. The darkness returned, and I fought it with all my might. She retreated, and I felt the throbbing pain in my chest slowly subside. Brock, you idiot, you gave her too much, Lily grumbled. It's okay, Mom, I managed. I need more. She grabbed the glass from him and started feeding me the ice a little at a time. I felt better. How long have I been here? I asked. Dad was kneeling next to the bed, holding my hand and looking into my face. 3.5 weeks, he said. God, we thought we lost you, honey. Well, you won't get rid of me that easily, I told him. What happened to me? That bastard shot you, that's what happened, Lily hissed. You rushed at Lucas when you saw that idiot with Gerald about to shoot Lucas, Dad said. You knocked him down, but the bullet hit you in the back. The doctors think you'll be fine. You'll have a couple of ugly scars until we fix them. You'll get better, honey. You just need to get some rest. Rest, and soon we will take you home. I gave him a weak smile and squeezed his hand. It hurts, I told them. Here, honey, I'll call the nurse, Lily said. She pressed a button on the bed rail, and I closed my eyes. The nurse came in, and Lily told him I was in pain. He did something to another button, and I felt the pain subside as I drifted off to sleep. When I woke up again, Lucas and Jonathan had joined Mom and Dad. They immediately noticed that I had opened my eyes, and Dad gave me more ice. Lucas quickly took the lead when he saw what was happening, and Lily sat Jonathan down on the bed. Mommy, are you okay? He asked in a quiet, frightened voice. Yes, John, Mommy is fine, I assured him. I just need to gain strength, and I'll be fine. I love you, John. I love you too, he whispered. He held my hand as if I was going to disappear. You really scared us all, honey, Lucas told me. I smiled at him. Yes, I know. I'll get better soon. He picked Jonathan up and handed him to his dad, then kicked them all out of the room. I need to talk to Mom, he told Jonathan. They left, promising to be right outside the door, and closed it. Lucas pulled a chair next to my bed and sat down. He held my hand and just looked at me for a while. I saw tears slowly begin to roll down his cheeks. God, Sin, I don't know what to say. His voice trembled. You saved my life. You took the bullet for me. I don't deserve you, I know it. But I'll tell you this. No matter what it takes, no matter what I have to do, I will spend the rest of my life convincing you that I was worth saving. I always knew you were special. From the moment I saw you at that table, I knew. I knew that if you accepted me, I would be the luckiest person in the world. I am. I know it. From now on, I will convince you that you made the right choice by agreeing to have lunch with me. I am hopelessly, madly in love with you, and I will do everything to make sure you know it until the day I die. My hand had difficulty working, but I was able to touch his chin. I never doubted you, I told him. We got a little confused for a while. Now we're back. Just give me a little strength and we'll be fine. He took my hand and kissed it. That boyish smile flashed across his face. And now, bring me something to eat, I told him. I'm starving. He put my hand on the bed, laughed, and stood up. That's my girl, he said. He walked out, and I heard Jonathan and Mom and Dad coming back, this dear little voice asking something. My baby was fine, I was fine, and we would be fine. I just needed some rest. A feeling of peace enveloped me. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click to the next one.